I'm Jane Turner from writewithjane.com, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar on how to write your business book. Now, we're going to be going through several chunks of information. Each of the dot points that you're seeing on the page today are essentially topics that we will be covering. And a logistical point I want to let you know about is that in between each of these sections, you'll be seeing a fairly dark screen. And that's just my trigger for you to take a moment to reflect on what you've just heard. Think about how you might take advantage of that information and just prepare yourself mentally for the next subject that we'll be moving on to. But the first thing we're going to be looking at is the question why. Essentially, it's about why you should listen to me, why you should write a book, and why you should do it now. So let's get right into that. This question of why me? Well, I'm an author. I've written 4 books. The most relevant to you is my book, Mindset for Authors: How to Overcome Perfectionism, Procrastination, and Self-Doubt. But more importantly than that, I'm an author coach. That's what lights me up. Helping people to write books to build their business is something I'm incredibly passionate about. And I'm also a publisher. I help people to publish their books, and I'm an international speaker because I learned how to leverage published author status to get some pretty incredible speaking opportunities. And that's what I help my authors to do as well. So that's me. But what I do specifically is that I have 3 distinct programs. One is called the Power Writing Program, and that's all about helping people to write books. I have the Power Publicity and Promotion Program. That's about getting the message about the book and the author's business out there. And then the Power Writers Publishing Group, which is all about packaging up a bookshop ready product for you to represent yourself as the go-to person in your field. And how I do it is by helping authors to overcome the 5 main barriers to getting their books written. And those barriers are around the question of process. That's about where do I start? What do I do next? How do I get my book published? And how do I leverage published author status to build my business and to get the message out there about my book and about what I do? And then there's the question of structure. And this is all about how to get the information out of your head and onto the page in the way that's going to really resonate with your target audience. And then there's the question of mindset. Now, I've written a whole book about this, but it's all about how to get out of your own way, how to avoid those things like overwhelm, confusion, perfectionism, procrastination. This is one of the main barriers to getting a book written, and I help my authors to avoid that, to keep out of that kind of a mindset and have their mindset on success, on completing the book, on building their business through the book, and all of the great opportunities that come with published author status. Then there's the question of energy. How do you maintain your productive and creative energy right through to published author status? And feedback. Now, this is about accountability on the one hand, and that's a really big deal. How do you keep yourself accountable to getting that book finished? But it's also about celebrating your wins. A big project like a book gets written because we break it down into smaller chunks. And it's about keeping yourself accountable to complete those smaller chunks and remembering to celebrate your wins along the way, because that's how you're going to keep your creative juices running. That goes to that question of energy. But these 5 points really meld together within my Power Writers program to get people over the published author barrier and to be leveraging all of the opportunities that are available on the other side. Now, we get to the question here of what you want. Why are you on this webinar? And I've run enough of these webinars and an awful lot of actual real events that I've heard everything in terms of what people want. I hear that people want a step-by-step plan. They want certainty and confidence. They don't want to be putting a whole lot of energy in and not getting the result. And by the result, I don't mean just a book, but a book that is going to kick the goals that they need it to kick for them. And they essentially want visibility and authority. They're writing the book to be seen as the authority in the space that they're working in. And there's that sense of satisfaction as well. Look, if you're investing time in watching a webinar like this, then you obviously know that a book is going to be the vehicle that is going to help you to get to where you want to be. So the satisfaction of actually getting there is definitely worth putting the work in for. And then, you know, a very practical point here, people want a solid return on investment. How are they going to make this worthwhile? And I often get asked, how much do you think I can make from selling my book? And I can't answer that question, but I do not want to overestimate the amount of money that people can make from selling books. For the most part, my authors are writing the book because they potentially want to use it as a lead magnet to get people into their sales funnel and into their coaching program. A lot of my clients are coaches, others are consultants, others are speakers, but this question of ROI is very important. We have to be very strategic about how we go about writing the book so that we can get that ROI for you. And then I often ask at my events, well, what's stopping you? And I've heard so many things, but so many things that are repeated over and over and over again. And here's what I hear: a lack of time. Very common. So one of the things I've done with the program I've put together is make it a lot easier for people to get the information out of their head and onto the page in a way that's going to resonate with their target audience, so that I can't give you more time, but I can make it possible for you to write a really great book in less time, put it that way. But lack of time I hear all the time in terms of what stops people. And there's a lack of confidence. Again, this goes to the mindset piece. And I help people to see that when they're strategic, they can get the kind of ROI that they're looking for, and they can write the kind of book that they'll be proud of, that will get the results that they need. And I get this one all the time: I just don't know where to start. Well, why would you want to reinvent the wheel? Just reach out for help and I can share with you how you get started. And part of this book, webinar, I should say, is exactly about that. The next piece, once we see the first dark slide that I say, which is for you to take a moment to reflect on what you've just heard, will take us into that piece of how do you get content out of your head and onto the page. So we cover off where to start very soon. But then there's this question of fear of failure and or fear of success. Very common. Again, this goes to mindset. And then there's this resistance of getting help. Now, I spent over 5 years writing my first book because I felt like I had to do it on my own. That was one of the problems I had. The other problem that I had was a case of shiny object syndrome, because I just kept buying more and more programs which essentially weren't the kind that I needed, but I wound up spending over $30,000 on getting my first book written. And I don't want you to go through anything like that. So please do feel free to reach out to have a session with me one-on-one if you don't learn everything that you need to through watching this webinar. And then there's this question of what are you missing out on? In other words, why should you push through all of the barriers to getting your book written and put the effort in? Well, what you're missing out on, and I hear this again all the time in my workshops and when I'm having conversations with people, and I know it from my own point of view, from actually persevering and getting myself through to published author status, what you're missing out on is being known as the go-to person in your field. That's one of the things. And having clients chasing you rather than the other way around. and being able to be charging what you're worth. Now, this is, of course, when you are known as the go-to person in your field, and when you have enough belief in yourself that you're worth more than you're charging, then you'll be able to charge what you're worth. And I know in the coaching space, there are an awful lot of people who are working in an incredibly crowded market and just not charging anywhere near what they're worth. Well, I promise you that none of my clients are in that category, because we go through the mindset piece, and it's the mindset piece to get your book written. But it's actually a much bigger deal than that, because it's about actually recognizing what you are worth and having enough confidence to ask for that in terms of what you're charging. And then, of course, there's the great stuff, the speaking and other profile building opportunities that are out there for published authors. And that satisfaction of leaving a legacy, it's an incredible thing. And we're going to take a moment now, because I really went through that first piece pretty quickly, covered off a lot of what might be holding you back. And now we're going to look at the how piece. The how do I help people to write their books? And here's what we do. We start with the end in mind. And this is all about who you're writing the book for. What do they care about? What do they dream of? What keeps them awake at night because they're worried about it? You know, what are they moving away from? In other words, what do they want less of in their life? And what are they moving toward? What do they want more of? So we get a very clear picture of who your reader is. We're calling them your target audience from here on in, but we understand them really well, A, because we've spent enough time thinking about it, and B, because we understand learning styles methodology. And this is what we're going to look at now. And this speaks to the structure piece. This is this real content piece of the webinar where I'm going to fill you in on how to get the information out of your head and onto the page in a way that will resonate with your target audience. So you've already started looking at your target audience when you're thinking about who you're writing the book for. But what you need to know is there are 4 learning styles that everybody in the world, the whole population that you're trying to get in touch with, are going to have one of the 4 learning styles predominant in their character. So we may each have a little bit of each of them, but pretty much the people you'll be trying to write for and connect with are either going to be why learners, what learners, how learners, and what if learners. And in a moment, I'm going to tell you about the characteristics of each of these groups, so that when you're thinking about who your target audience is, and you've got that overview that we talked about a minute ago, about what do they want more of in their life and what do they want less of, when we look at this from the point of view of learning styles, you're now going to get an appreciation of how you can communicate with your target audience, no matter what learning style they have. So we're going to start with the why learners. And these people make up 35% of the population. So it's a pretty big group of people that you would be missing out on if you have very little in the way of why learner inclinations yourself. So the why learners are people who love discussion. They are going to be wanting to talk something through. They also will be wondering why I should care about this. So in terms of your book, they'll be wondering, why should I read this book? What's in it for me? And for you to connect with a why learner, a sentence that starts like this will really resonate with them. And that sentence is, I share this with you because, or why you should care about this is, because that's the way your why learners think. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot of depth on this, because what we can do is have a one-on-one session. I have a complimentary session for any action takers. And if you're watching this webinar, you are an action taker. And the link for my schedule will be on the very last slide. So if you want to know more about this, or in fact any of the topics that I cover in this webinar, then you can book yourself a session with me and we can do a deep dive in terms of your specific situation. So that's your why learners for now. The next lot we're looking at are the what learners. Now these guys are 22% of the population. They love information. They're not so much about discussion, but what they are about is data and facts. They love graphs. They love quotes. They love what you're looking at now. They love dot points. Your what learners are, fairly different to the why learners. There's a lot of overlap with all of the 4 learning styles, but you can see the difference here. It's very much about a sentence that starts with what I cover in this article is. Now you'll notice I use the word article, not book. I could have used the word speak or presentation. I could have used blog. Look, any number of ways that you can use the information you have about learning styles, but specifically it could be what I cover in this chapter, for example. But what I cover in this book is, or what you will find in this chapter is, will totally resonate with your what learners. So moving right along here, we're going to have a look at the how learners. Now these people are 18% of the population. They love activity. These are the kind of people in a workshop who, when the presenter says what we're going to do now is break into a group of 3, one of you will be the client, one of you will be the observer, and one of you will be doing the coaching activity. This is in the case of a presentation for coaches. Then your how learners are going to be the first ones breaking into groups of 3. They love this because they're getting a chance to try it out. Now, your why learners are going to go, what? Do we have to waste our time doing this? But the how learners are going to love it. The what learners love it as well because they are going to get to see what exactly is included. But it's your how learners in particular who are just going to jump at this opportunity. They're going to go, yes, this is for me. Because they're going to be asking themselves unconsciously, how can I use this? How can I use this methodology I've just learned? Or how can I use this strategy that I've just read in your book? They want to know how. And they will really resonate with a sentence that starts like this. You'll get the most out of reading this book if you... And the end of that sentence might be, it might be, you'll get the most out of reading this book if you're prepared to get a little bit uncomfortable and try something that you might never have done before. So can you see how that would work for a how learner? And 18% of the population. I mean, this is the smallest group, but you certainly don't want to cut yourself out from being able to relate with 18% of your potential readers, do you? So this is why it matters so much. And then you've got the what if learners. Now these are your creative people. They're about 25% of the population. They love questions. And the kind of questions they're going to be asking are, what if I do it this way and not that way? This is when you might be sharing a strategy with them. And they'll be thinking, yeah, I can see the point of this strategy, but wouldn't it be even better if I do X, Y, or Z? So as I say, they're very creative, the what if learners. You don't want to be, putting a big foot on their creativity. You don't want to be saying, well, don't do it any other way. This is the only way you should do it. You want to be using language that really acknowledges that you understand them. Because really, one of the things that we need as human beings is when we need or we long for a sense of being understood. And the other thing you have to watch for with your what if learners is that some of them are excellent procrastinators because they might be thinking in their head, what if I don't do it at all? And I want to give you an example of how I handled this in Mindset for Authors. So in Mindset for Authors, I often have a pause in my chapters where I say, what I want you to do now is stop reading for a minute and answer the following questions. And what I said to address the what if learners, I say, if you are anything like I used to be, you're probably thinking, look, I'm not going to answer these questions now. I'll leave it. I'll skip over this and I'll come back to it when I'm finished the book. But I think we both know that, in fact, you won't do that, because it's just so much easier to avoid doing it at all if you don't do it right now. So I would love to encourage you to break your normal pattern and just see how you go with answering these questions now. So can you see how that would make a what if learner feel as if they'd been acknowledged? And it may just be enough of a nudge to help them break a pattern that could, in fact, really make a big difference to them in their life. So that's how you're working with the what ifs. Now, some of this may feel like it's a little bit too simple to actually work. And it's true that putting these pieces together, there is a particular way to do it. So I do encourage you to book in for one of my complimentary sessions so I can go through it with you in some more depth if you don't feel like you've got enough of a grasp of it now. So this is that moment for you to take a pause, think about learning styles, thinking about how you might use that to actually get the information out of your head and onto the page in a way that is going to help you address as broad a range of your target audience as possible. And what we're going to do now is actually move on to the publishing area. And what I want you to know is that there are 3 types of publishing. You've got your traditional publishers, your hybrid versions of publishing, and then, of course, there's self-publishing. So I'll take each one of these in turn. Now, traditional publishing is where you've got an idea that you want to pitch to one of the bigger publishing houses or one of the smaller ones. And essentially, they're going to be assessing your idea for saleability. They are running a business and they do not want to be publishing books that won't be bringing in money for them. They need to know that your book is going to be saleable and that you are going to be up for promoting it. So they might organise a book tour for you, for example, and they're just not going to take you on if you're not going to be prepared to travel around and do book signings at Dymocks or whatever it is that they might set up for you. They need to know that you're going to put some energy behind the book to make sure that you're driving sales. So the great thing about traditional publishers is that they're essentially taking all of the risk. It's not costing you anything to get your book edited or proofread or laid out in a print version as well as an ebook version. It's not costing you anything to get your cover design done, to get the whole. It's essentially like a project management task, publishing a book. You need all of your, you need ISBN numbers, you need CRT registration, you need a barcode. Bringing all of that together and producing a bookshop-worthy book is what publishing is all about. So if you get picked up by a traditional publisher, they will do all of that work for you. Meanwhile, they will take the lion's share of the revenue that comes in for the book. They will negotiate a commission that you get, and it will be a very small commission for your first book. Known authors, of course, have negotiating power. First-time authors usually don't. So you're giving away a lot of the revenue from the book, and you're also giving away a lot of the decision-making. You might want to have a pink cover. If the publishing company wants you to have a grey cover, guess what? You're not going to have a pink cover. You can't do things like I did, for example, on the cover of Mindset for Authors. I have my website address. And why wouldn't I, frankly? That book is essentially my business card. There's no way you could be having your web address on the front of a book that's picked up by a traditional publisher. The other thing about those publishers is that a lot of them won't talk to authors. They will only talk to agents. So you'll either be pitching yourself directly to the publisher, or you'll be pitching yourself to an agent. But either way, they are looking at the saleability of your idea and the saleability of you, essentially, as an author. So that's how the traditional publishing area works. Then there's the hybrid version. And you might remember I mentioned earlier that I run the Power Writers Publishing Group, and that's essentially a hybrid way to get your book published. So you're not doing the project management of getting your book published, and you're not handing it over to a traditional publisher. But if you hand it over to someone like me, I have experts in the publishing area who will do all of the bits of work that need to be done. And those bits of work, as I said earlier, are the layouts, or the editing initially, the proofreading, the layouts for a print and digital version of your book, the book cover, the ISBNs, all of those fiddly bits, that will all be done for you. However, you will be paying a fee to get that done. Meanwhile, once you pay that fee, someone like me won't take any commission out of your book sales, so you get to keep all of that money. And then the last stop point here is the self-publishing option. So that's where you don't have somebody else doing the project management for you. You're doing it all yourself. So in a sense, you're trading off time for money. And sometimes I know people will make that option because they want to keep the money for something else. They might want to be paying for publicity. They might want to be paying for Facebook ads or something like that. So it's definitely a valid option. It's just a heck of a lot of work and a heck of a lot of risk to take on. It's so very easy to make mistakes in that space. So, what I wanted to do with this section of the webinar was just give you a bit of an overview of the options available to you. And as I've said earlier, you'll get the link to my calendar on the last slide that you see today, and you're more than welcome to book in a time for me, and I can tell you a whole lot more about getting your book published. What I've got here is an image of one of my authors. Alana Mae Mitchell wrote a brilliant book called Being Brave. She really just needed the help with getting the book published. So there's a very proud looking Alana with her bookshop ready book, and what she got from that was some incredible opportunities. One was to speak with Beyond Blue, and the other one was a connection with Sophie Scott, who is the medical reporter with the ABC. And Sophie Scott had actually agreed to launch Alana's book for her. However, COVID got in the way. So watch this space for 2021, when hopefully Alana will get that opportunity to launch her book with Sophie Scott. That's an incredible open door to the ABC that she generated off the back of the book. And I helped her through all of my skills with getting free publicity and connecting with people like that. But more power to Alana. She got that book published through the hybrid publishing version. And now we're going to take that moment to break and just think about how you might go about publishing your book. Which of those three options look like they would suit you best? And just get ready now to get into this question of how you're going to monetize the material in the book. This is about using the book in more than one format, more than words on a page or words on a screen with the digital formatting. This is that piece about repurposing. And you might be repurposing that material into possibly an online program or a coaching package or presentations or articles or blogs, any number of ways that you can take the work that you've done once and use it numerous times. So a couple of people whose experiences I want to share with you here are Joel Annesley. Now, Joel wasn't like Alana. He opted in for the full suite of programs that I offer. So he came to me with the idea. No idea, though, how to get the information out of the head and onto the page, and how many chapters he should have, and how long the chapters should be, and how long the book should be. These were all of the questions that he came to me with. He also knew that he needed somebody to keep him accountable. He wasn't like Alana. The last thing she needed was someone to keep her accountable. she got that book written with her own drive to get it done. Joel, on the other hand, needed help with accountability. He needed help with, having his book regularly reviewed so that he could have confidence that it was going to achieve what he needed it to achieve for him. And the point is, he got that book finished. And off the back of the book, he launched a podcast, and his quietly successful podcast is really going great guns for him. And he's also built a coaching package off the back of the material in the book. He's doing more study at the moment. He's actually getting his hypnosis qualifications. But it was the book that got the whole thing started. It's been an incredible journey. And look, here's Joel. It's a classic case of taking the material from the book and the branding from the book. His book was called Quietly Confident: How to Break Up with Shyness. He's, of course, using that branding into Quietly Successful, the podcast. And he runs meetup groups. All sorts of things came off the back of Joel's book. And then there's a slightly different example I can share with you. And this is a fellow called Sam Lee. Now, Sam came to me. He already had his first book called The Social Way. And he specifically wanted to turn that into an online program. And I looked at the book for him and I said, who's your target audience here? When he talked about his target audience, there was a definite mismatch with the book. And it was a hard conversation to have with Sam. But I said, Sam, I think you've written the wrong book. I think what we need to do is actually repurpose the content in the book and come out with a second book. And that's what Connect with Confidence is. That's Sam's second book. And we wrote that book specifically to build an online program. So it's no coincidence that there's an 8-chapter book that coincides with an 8-week online program. And his program includes a chapter of the book every week, a set of worksheets that we devise together out of the book. Each week you get a worksheet, a chapter of the book, and a group coaching session via Zoom. So we worked all of that out before we did the repurposing of the content within the book that was called The Social Way. And we have now Sam's second book out in the market, which is called Connect with Confidence. So there's all sorts of ways to repurpose. Again, if you want to have a conversation specifically about what your ideas around this are, then just book in for a time to chat with me, because I'd love to kick the ball around with you in terms of what the options are. And here's one of those little pauses again, because what we're going to do now is have a look at how to promote the book, how to get free publicity, how to get speaking gigs. It's all about leverage and taking the next step. Don't just write the book. It doesn't end there. And now what you're seeing on the screen are sourcebottle.com and helpareporter.com. Now, sourcebottle.com is the one specifically that got me all of the great results that I'm going to be sharing with you in a moment. But both of these are about connecting people with stories and experiences and expertise to share with the people out there who need you to be sharing their information, your information, I should say, with their audiences. So sign up for sourcebottle.com and helpareporter.com. Now, with Sourcebottle in particular, you'll get 2 emails in your inbox every day with call-outs from producers, editors, people who are needing you as a source. That's why it's called sourcebottle.com. So the first big opportunity that I got was with the Australian Women's Weekly in April 2016. This was through Sourcebottle, and I answered a call out where they were asking for someone to share their experience of menopause. Now, what I need to tell you is that, you've heard about my book, Mindset for Authors, How to Overcome Perfectionism, Procrastination, Self-Doubt. Well, how come I'm in a book called Australian Women's Weekly? Well, my first book, and a bit like Sam, I wrote the wrong first book. I wrote a book called Thrive in Midlife, because initially my plan was just to use that to launch a coaching business around helping women in the midlife phase. But I actually had a cathartic experience when I was standing on stage launching that book. And I had just a blinding insight that I wasn't actually put on this earth to help women through menopause. I was put on this earth to help people share their story. And through writing a book, to share their story and build their expertise and build their business, that's what gets me up in the morning. That's what lights me up. So I guess I had to write the first book to get that moment of awareness and that insight. And I guess the experience of taking 5 years and over $30,000 invested in various writing programs and what have you, to realise that I could make it easier for people who, essentially they'll look at me because I've gone before them. And that's how I actually wound up working in this space of helping people to write and publish books. But really, it's this piece that sometimes people come to me for, because they've already written a book, but they're getting really frustrated because they're not getting any traction with it. So I can help them to get free publicity. But as I say, there was the first piece I got off sourcebottle.com, major coverage in the Australian Women's Weekly, which had the key demographic that I'd written my book for. So that's where the match was. That's how this can be incredibly helpful for selling a book like Thrive in Midlife. And that's where this second piece of publicity I got was very helpful as well. This was Prevention Magazine in February 2017. And again, my key demographic reads that magazine. But I want to get on to the next strategy that I want to share with you, because whilst I got this off Source Bottle, what I am telling you about next, I got because of leveraging this piece of publicity. So you'll see there's Deborah Hutton, in case you don't know who that is. That's Deborah Hutton on the front cover, and there's me on one of the pages inside. And I took a screenshot of this. You'll notice we've both got our hands in our pockets. I mean, that's how the photographers, they tell you to stand that way. And I thought it was a bit cute. We're both standing the same way. I took a screenshot of this and I sent it off to Deborah Hutton's people. Now, why would I do that? You might be thinking. Well, Deborah Hutton has a website called Balance by Deborah Hutton that had, at the time, hundreds of thousands of women in the demographic that Thrive in Midlife was written for. Hundreds of thousands of women, possibly, millions of women now. And coverage for me on that website was going to be very, very helpful from the point of view of raising awareness of my book, Thrive in Midlife. And what I did is I, as I say, took that screenshot, got in touch with Deborah Hutton's people, and next thing, here I am on the website, Balance by Deborah Hutton. Now, I've taken this screenshot for you because given what I told you about leveraging the last screenshot that I had, I think you can imagine what I did with this one. Because you'll notice that there's Jane Turner on the bottom left image, and diagonally across is Lisa Wilkinson. So at that time, she was one of the hosts for the Today program. So I took a screenshot of this, I sent it off to the producer at the Today show, and I rang up and had a conversation with him. So this had nothing to do with Source Bottle. This is where you're actually really getting out of your comfort zone and reaching out directly to, in this case, the producer of the Today show. And when I share this, people often ask me, well, how did you get in touch with him? How did you know who to ask for? Well, this is a little bit of a crazy story, and it still amazes me that it was this easy. But what I did was this. I picked up the phone and rang the switchboard at Channel 9. And I said, I'm wondering if you could tell me who the producer of the Today show is and how I might get in touch with them. And the lady on the switchboard said, yep, that's Tom Nichols. Here's his email address. Here's his phone number, and I'll give you his mobile number as well because he's not often at his desk. Can you believe that? I made one phone call and got all of that information. So what I did is I sent an email first with the attachment of this screenshot. 2 days later, I rang and got through to his voicemail, left a voicemail message, but rang his mobile number, which he answered. And he said, oh, hello, what can I do for you? I said, look, it's Jane Turner here. Tom, I just wanted to check if you needed any more information about the email I sent you a couple of days ago. And he said, well, just can you remind me what it's about? And I said, yes, look, I had a photo attached to it with Lisa Wilkinson because we were both on Balance by Deborah Hutton. And I was wondering if, Lisa might be interested in interviewing me about my book, Thriving Midlife, for the audience on the Today Show. And Tom said, oh, right. Look, leave it with me. I'm just going into a meeting, but can I call you back? And I said, absolutely. Now, I thought I might have been getting a really polite brush off there. But what do you know? Tom called me back. We talked a little bit more. He asked me to send a copy of the book through. And in the end, I didn't actually wind up on the Today Show. But I did wind up on Today Extra. And there I am on the couch with Georgie Gardner, David Campbell, and one of their other guests. And what's crazy about being on the Today Extra show is that they run your website across the bottom of the screen all the time while you're talking. And at the end of it, David Campbell says, if you want to know more about what Jane does, just visit her blog. And he gives the blog address. Now, really, incredible things can happen. So I give you all of this information because I want you to see that it's possible. I'm not a publicist. I'm just somebody who joins the dots, who realises, and this speaks to the mindset piece, guys, I realise that the editors and producers of shows like Today Extra, for example, I've also been on the 7:30 report. I've also been on the House of Wellness, and I'll show you that one in a moment, actually. But really, these producers have a black hole to fill. If you can help them fill it, then of course they want to talk to you. But you have to be thinking strategically, and you have to be prepared in terms of the conversation you'll have, in terms of the email that you send them. So let me move on to this one about the House of Wellness. Now, this was one through Source Bottle. This time I answered a call out for someone to talk about their experience of rejection. Well, I was able to tick that box because my story is that I worked in the public service my whole working life up to the age of 52, and then I was made redundant. Well, these guys produced a section about me that I now leverage that in so many different ways I can't tell you. And the last slide that you'll see on this presentation will give you a link to go through and watch that footage. Really, they compared me to J.K. Rowling, Oprah Winfrey, and Elvis Presley. I'll say no more except to say there are some incredible opportunities out there. And in this next slide here, this is about me speaking on stage at the State Library of New South Wales. Now, this is one of the opportunities that I make available for authors. I actually run author showcase events at the State Library of New South Wales that are professionally videotaped so that my authors get 20 minutes of footage speaking about their book and themselves and their business, with State Library New South Wales signage clearly visible. And this is incredible from the point of view of getting a foot in the door in terms of free publicity, in terms of speaking opportunities, and in terms of specifically getting yourself out of that speaker quagmire where a lot of people are positioned so that they're getting a lot of speaking opportunities where they're not being paid, but crossing that bridge to be in a position where you are able to charge a fee to speak. The credibility of the State Library goes an awful long way to positioning you, so long as, of course, what you're talking about, you're doing it confidently. And again, I help my authors in that way. I help them get a really valuable piece of footage that's in that publishing and promotion field. And I want to share with you Tracy Tully. She's someone who came to me at completely the other end of the spectrum. She had already written a book, not like Sam. She hadn't written the wrong book. She'd written absolutely the right book because it encapsulates her whole message about building resilience. And she came to me because she was frustrated. She wasn't getting the kind of leverage the kind of profile building that she wanted. She absolutely wanted to speak on stage at the State Library of New South Wales and tap into my knowledge about getting free publicity. She actually got a spot on the ABC, and most to the point is that she fulfilled a lifelong dream by speaking at the Women's Economic Forum event that was run in Cairo in March this year. She was actually going to be having a huge march because she had Women's Economic Forum at the beginning and the speaker spot at the State Library with me in the author showcase events at the end of March. But of course, that one had the rug pulled out from under it because of COVID. So Tracy is going to be coming back in March 2021 for that footage from the State Library. But she's already got a lot of traction and a lot of coverage just from Women's Economic Forum, which I hooked her up with, and I can do that for all of my female authors, and the publicity building aspect of it. So definitely time to take a moment now, because I've got myself all worked up thinking about you, watching this presentation and what it's going to be like for you when you get yourself to published author status. And I want to connect right back around and put the lens on you and just make it very, very clear why I don't want you to leave this webinar and do nothing. And I'm calling this, the heading on this slide is what's at stake. What are you going to be missing out on if you don't take action and finish your book and publish your book and get out there and promote it? It's that piece about leveraging that published author status to get free publicity and speaking gigs and to be taken seriously, taken more seriously than you are now. And not having to work so hard for so little. I see too many people in the coaching space in particular not charging anywhere near as much as they should, given their qualifications and their ability. These are great people, but they're working in a very crowded market where people with higher profiles than them scooping the cream off the top. So it's this thing about being able to be charging what you're worth and being known as the go-to person in your field, raising your visibility, raising that degree of credibility that you're held within, being seen as the expert. And it's leaving your legacy. Now, you know that you've been called to write a book for a reason. And it's about more than just building your business. It's about an important message that you have to share. And you're never going to get that sense of satisfaction and purpose unless you get the clarity around completion. Get it done, move on, be able to help the people that you need to help and that need your help. And really, in a time like COVID, it could come down to something like this, to being able to sustain your business. And really taking that next step, hooking up with me through writewithjane.com. You can take a look at the House of Wellness clip, and I do want you signing up for Helper Reporter and Source Bottle. And last but not least, book in for a session with me so that we can drill down into your exact circumstances and get you over the line to published author status.